Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, we're going to be going over nutrition, how to eat. Now, I know it sounds basic, but I promise you, if you stick with me, you're going to see that the basics of life is where all of the secrets of life are. And so why is this training important? In this training, we're going to be continuing our theme of the science of transformation, and we're going to be looking at the third how question of nutrition. So remember, we're going over the 4 pillars of health: nutrition, movement, sleep, and recharge. And we are right now into the biggest pillar, which is nutrition. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about inside of this training. So keep in mind, remember, as we've been saying all along, these trainings are the foundation for you to go through your own personal transformation, as well as for you to be able to help others go through their transformation as well. So yes, I know getting your certification in remote wellness is not going to be easy. It is not going to be an overnight process, but I promise you, if you stick with it, it will 100% absolutely be worth it, and it will 100% absolutely transform your life for the rest of your life. So it's 100% worth it, so make sure that you keep sticking with it, okay? So just as a recap, in terms of the 3 how questions that we are going over, we said that we are going to be discussing 3 of them here, and the first one was how much to burn. The second one is how much to eat. And we've already gone ahead and taken care of those. And now, finally, in this training, we're going to be talking about how to eat. Okay. Now, I want to go ahead and emphasize one more time. All 3 of these aspects to understand about nutrition are absolutely critical, because they are going to allow you to undergo your own transformation. So that way you can understand the nuts and bolts behind what nutrition actually is, instead of whatever crazy thing that social media or society is trying to sell you on right now. Okay. Now, before we hop into the training, this is a very, very, very big thing I want to go ahead and emphasize here. Some students will get to this point in the training and they say, hey, Coach Yasin, this is all a lot. Okay. And you might be feeling that way too. You might be like, man, dude, like what in the world? All of this is a lot. Okay. Do I really have to retain all of this information? Do I really have to know all of this, Coach Yasin? And so I want you to listen to me very, very, very carefully. The answer to that question is no, no, no. I am pleading with you and I am begging you here. Stick with me, okay? The big mental shift that you are going to have to make in order to understand the point that I'm about to say right now is that you need to understand that all of what you are going through right now is just a reference for you. What is it? It's a reference for you, okay? And this is a very, very, very big switch from the way that normal school works. And this is why a lot of RWA students, or I should say some RWA students, I won't say a lot, I will say some RWA students struggle with that transition. Because here's the thing. In normal school, you have to go through the education at the pace of the teacher, right? If you don't understand something, too bad. The test is coming up. The test has been scheduled in this semester or in the school year, and we got to go at a certain pace, and everybody has to keep up with that pace, okay? So what I want to urge you to do right now is I want you to break free from what school has taught you about education, because the current school system and how school is designed right now was built at a time 50 and 100 years ago where they were designed to create workers, okay? And so they had limited resources, and so they just pile drived into everybody's brain a bunch of information that they did not necessarily need. We now are in the 21st century, and we have a completely different way to educate people, and that's exactly how you are going through this new age education process here at Remote Wellness Academy. And so there are no tests here. There is no exam here. There are no grades here. There is no A, B, C, D, F. None of that exists inside of the Remote Wellness Academy. Why? Because the only test that actually matters is the real world. And that test is going to be when you start to make money and you actually start to transform people's lives. This is why traditional education gets all these people who are trying to, hack the standardized tests and try to do amazing on the test. Well, there are people out there that are straight A students, straight B students, whatever it is, and they still suck at real world stuff. Why? Because traditional education does not work, okay? And so there is no school curriculum that is structured the way that you are going through right now, okay? Because school programs teaches its students to force feed knowledge. It pushes you to learn things that are abstract, theoretical, and that you will probably never use ever again in your entire life. Did traditional school have some awesome things that we learned? Yes. But was a lot of the stuff that we never, ever needed ever again? Yes, as well. And so here at Remote Wellness Academy, we take a different approach, okay? What we do is that we plant the seeds in your mind, okay? And how that happens is by you going through the trainings once or twice, okay? And then when you get to module number 5 and you start practicing, you're going to find, oh, snap, that seed that was planted in my head, I know exactly where I got to go to in order to find that information. And so all of that becomes a reference for you. And so everything we're going through right now becomes a reference for you, okay? So I'm going to urge you at the beginning of this training, and as we are getting through module 3 here, do not try to memorize or to get all of this information from the start. It's not going to happen, okay? Do you remember what we said about how terrible the human memory was, right? And so we said that the forgetting curve is that within 1 hour, people have forgotten 50% of what they have learned. And so we have created this curriculum and this program with that fact in mind. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that we're good on this point, and it's very, very, very important for us to be good on this point. Awesome. Now next, the second fear I want to go ahead and address right now. The fear might come up and say, hey, but coach, I just want to be prepared if a student asks me a question, right? That is why I am freaking out and getting overwhelmed, is because I just want to be ready for my student and I want to know exactly what to tell them, right? I'm living in this fear in my head that what if a student asks me this question and I don't know the answer to it? That is why I'm trying to memorize everything that you're trying to say, Coach Yasin. And so I want to make this point very, very, very clear to you right now. I can understand your concern, but listen to this. There are many, many, many days where me, Yasin, the person that you are listening to right now, who has created these trainings, all of it came from my brain, okay? I get on coaching calls and students ask me questions and I have no idea what the student is asking me. And then I end up having to watch the training again that I myself created. And sometimes I even end up having to watch the training with the student because I myself don't remember what it is that we talked about. And so when I say that the human brain and the human memory is terrible, I'm not joking, okay? And so it's normal, okay? Because right now we live in a different world. We live in the world of the internet. And so there is no reason for you to have to memorize things anymore. It's already all on the internet as a reference. This classroom that you're listening to me right now through exists on the internet, right? And so your goal right now is not to try to think, hey, can I answer all of the questions that my students are going to have about these topics? We will get to that later on. But you are not ready for that right now. I'm going to talk to you all about this topic of how to be able to be prepared for students and all that kind of stuff when we get to module 5. Right now, what we are doing is we are planting the seeds so that way you can actually reference this material in the future, okay? So I promise you, it is all going to click for you and all of these pieces are going to come together for you in the upcoming modules, okay? So do not try to create monsters for yourself that do not even exist right now, okay? So please, right now, don't worry about anything. Just enjoy the process. Let the light bulbs go off in your head and just promise me, pinky promise me that you won't get overwhelmed. Please, okay? And so when I say that I care for you, I really do care for you, okay? All of us here at RWA, we want you to be successful with this. But you can't be successful with this if you never make it to the end of the classroom training because you got overwhelmed, okay? And so your number one priority is to keep moving. You got this. You're doing great. You're doing phenomenal. I believe in you. So please don't get overwhelmed. And we're going to stick through this together and we're going to make it on the other side. And you're going to be so happy that you did. Okay. So that is the first and very important note that I wanted to go ahead and mention from the very beginning of this training. So with all of that being said, inside of the guide, there is the training outline there for you as well to make a quick reference in the future. And let's go ahead and jump into the meat and potatoes and let's talk about the $1 million question, which is how to eat, okay? So let's go ahead and take a real quick stroll through memory lane because honestly, you have made amazing progress through your certification and really in your own health transformation up until this point, right? So we've talked about what is food. We've talked about the blood sugar roller coaster. We've talked about energy you burn. We've talked about energy you eat. We've talked about the levels of metabolism. We've talked about the levels of food measuring. Like you've been through a lot. You deserve a pat on your back. You've been doing amazing. However, remember, this is the real world And no pat on the back is not going to help us fill up our bank accounts. And so we just got to keep on going through because money is coming, and we just got to make sure that we get through the certification first. Okay. So to think that we went through all of that, wow. Now, it is completely normal because some students at this point might be thinking, okay, you know what, Coach Yasin, we've gone through a lot. Man, we've gone through a lot. And so it is at this point that some students might be thinking, man, Coach Yasin, after the process that I've been through so far in this module, man, I'm starting to get a hang of this, right? This is going to be pretty easy peasy, right? All I'm going to do is, number one, calculate my calories, right? I'm going to do everything that you taught us in the how much to burn training, right? The calculate the maintenance and then figure out the calories based off of the goal, all of that stuff. And then step 2, I'm going to use those calculations as my starting point. And then step 3, I'm going to measure and track. So I'm going to measure and track my food. Maybe I use level 5 app tracking. I'm going to make sure I get enough protein in. I'm going to stay under my calorie ceiling every single day. I'm going to weigh myself every single morning and collect the data. And then every single week, step 4, I'm going to look at that data. And then I'm going to look at the average weight that I had. And I'm going to see, am I losing or gaining weight at the rate that I said that I was going to based off of the goal and the initial hypothesis baseline that I set? If I'm not, then guess what? I'm just going to adjust my calories accordingly and then move on from there. Boom. See, Coach Yasin, rinse and repeat. And I'm going to keep that process going until I reach my goal. See, Coach Yasin, I'm learning well, right? No biggie, right? And so for that student, my first initial response would be, dang, grasshopper, look at you really going beast mode. You're really soon becoming the master. That would be my first response, okay? Because honestly, that summary right there would be beast mode, okay? Honestly. And so that would be my first response. And then my second response would be, yes, although you are spot on, there is one more catch. There is one more catch. Because here is the thing. Here's the thing. Yes, if that was what you said in terms of summarizing where we are so far in the module, you would be ahead of 99.99% of most people and most of society. And honestly, like there are some so-called experts that don't even understand these topics as deep as you understand them now, okay? However, there is one more thing that literally no one talks about when it comes to nutrition. Because even if you are doing everything spot on, exactly the way that we have spoken about inside of this module so far, guess what? You might still not lose or gain weight consistently. What? Coach Yasin, what are you saying? You're saying that even if I did everything we talked about so far, I might still not lose weight or gain weight consistently? Coach Yasin, what are you saying? You literally preached over and over and over again, calorie deficit, calorie deficit, calorie deficit. In every single training, calorie deficit, calorie deficit. You literally talked to us about why the reasons of diets working, right? You said the only way to lose fat is to eat less calories than you burn. You said the only way to lose fat is to eat less calories than you burn. You said it over and over and over again, Coach Yasin. It's literally like ingrained and tattooed into our brains. And so what are you saying, Coach Yasin? You're saying right now that even if I did that, I might still not get the results that I'm looking for? Here's the thing. Stick with me for a second, okay? Because I promised you that you'd have the most in-depth understandings of health and nutrition and wellness on the planet. And so I can't not explain to you this final missing piece. Because here's the truth. Almost as much as how much you eat, and almost as much as what you eat, how you eat matters just as much. I'm going to say that again. Almost as much as what you eat and how much you eat, how you eat matters just as much. Now, some students, after hearing that, might say, Coach, but I already know how to eat. My mama taught me how to eat, right? My mama taught me, hey, don't make a mess, eat with manners, have table etiquette. But hear me out for a second, okay? Because how to eat isn't about whether or not you should wipe off that pizza sauce when your mouth is covered with it. Yes, you should be doing that also, okay? But here's the truth. In today's world, eating is something that we do on autopilot. Something that we do while we are blindfolded without thinking, and we do it automatically, okay? We eat in today's world because we have to. We eat while we drive, we eat while we watch a show, we eat while we work. We do it as if it's this task that is an inconvenience that we have to check off, right? Let's just hurry up and get over with this eating. We do it on autopilot, okay? And so what we're going to be talking about inside of this training is, when we talk about this, we're going to be talking about the how to eat is the method to eat in which your body has a chance to actually use the calories that you've eaten, okay? Now, you might be confused when I say that. And so let me go ahead and explain a little bit more, and let me explain to you exactly what the problem is and why exactly it is such a big problem. And so we've already spoken about how most people in society, they don't even understand metabolism and food measuring, right? We talked about how there are levels of metabolism. People don't even understand that. And then on top of that, we talked about the levels of measuring, and we said that most people in society don't even understand that. But then there are just a few so-called experts who have gone through these overload certifications and degrees, and maybe they understand a little bit about metabolism and they understand a little bit about food measuring. And what they keep saying is calorie deficit, calorie deficit, calorie deficit. The only way to lose fat is to eat less calories than you burn, okay? And so where you are right now in your journey, that's where most of these so-called, or some of these so-called experts are. However, we are not just stopping there, because what I want you to understand is that even though these experts think of all of this just like a numbers game, the truth is that what you have learned so far and what you eat is actually only half the equation, okay? So we got this balance right here, and what we've talked about so far is half the equation, okay? Why is it only half the equation? I want to talk to you about why it's only half the equation. This is very important, and stick with me here, okay? It's only half the equation because let's say you are eating the right foods, right? All of what we talked about in terms of what to eat, prioritizing not spiking your blood sugar, not crashing your blood sugar, all of that kind of stuff. And then you're also prioritizing the right amounts of food, which is how much to eat, right? How much to burn, all that stuff we talked about, the protein minimum, the number of calories, all of that kind of stuff. However, even though you're doing all of that, you are stressed out of your mind. What happens to all of the food that you spend all of this energy trying to get right, okay? What happens to that food is that it sits in your stomach like a rock, okay? Your body is unable to digest that food. Why? Because the body doesn't feel safe. And so let me explain to you what exactly is happening to the body when you are stressed out of your mind and you don't feel safe. Because the body says, yo, we ain't got no time to digest and absorb these nutrients, right? We're in straight fight or flight mode. Why does the body talk like that and say, yo? I have no idea. But the body says, yo, we out here trying to survive, man. We out here trying to survive, woman. We got to kick up our survival defenses, right? And then the body kicks up adrenaline, which is the fight or flight hormones. It kicks up cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And so the body says, yo, we're not trying to let things be normal right now because we're in abnormal emergency mode times, okay? The body says, yo, I don't care if you just drank from the freaking fountain of youth right now. We are not going to absorb any nutrients right now because first off, we're just going to focus on surviving. And so this is what the body is saying when we are in an extremely stressed response. And so as a result, you're starting to now see what the real problem is, right? And so this is why for someone, even if they are eating below their caloric needs, even if they're making all of that effort to eat properly, because their body is in fight or flight mode, because their body is so completely stressed, their body will not easily let go of the most precious resource that it has, which is its hard-earned stored fat reserves, its hard-earned stored energy reserves, just like we've talked about, right? Why? Because the body thinks it's in a life-threatening situation. Because the body thinks it's in a life-threatening situation. Now, some students after hearing that might say, come on, Coach Yasin, my body isn't afraid every day, right? I'm not living in some less industrialized country where I got to worry about my safety every single day. I live in a very nice house. I live in a very nice community. I ain't worried about my life and death every single day, right? This doesn't apply to me. I live in America. I live in Canada. I live in the UK. I live in Australia. I live in whatever country. I'm not worried about my life and death right now. Stick with me for a second, okay? Because do you remember our old friend, the limbic self? Our old friend, the limbic self, right? We've talked about him or her for a while now, right? And do you remember what the limbic self's main job was, right? We talked about this in previous trainings. We said that the limbic self's main job is to keep us alive. And so the limbic self is really all about survival. And so if the limbic self is all about survival, well, guess what? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been late for a meeting and got really worried that, oh man, I'm going to be late for this meeting, right? Have you ever gotten into an argument with a loved one, with a spouse, with a husband, with a wife, right? Have you ever gotten worried about not having enough money at the end of the month, right? Late for a meeting, argued with a loved one, not having enough money. Well, my friend, your limbic self, your limbic brain, your body actually does not know the difference between those things or a lion that's trying to kill you in the wild. I'm serious. To the limbic self, all of what it is that we just talked about are also threats to our existence as much as a lion that's trying to kill us, okay? And so your limbic self does not know the difference between being late for a meeting and work stress, relationship stress, kid stress. It doesn't know the difference between family stress, financial stress, lack of sleep stress, or any of the other modern day problems that we might face today, okay? And so what it does is it codes all of these as actual life-threatening problems. And so here it is in a visual format, right? Lion versus financial stress. Limbic self and brain does not know the difference between it. Same thing with the body, right? Being late for work, meeting, right? Kids stress, relationship stress, okay? Work stress. The body does not know the difference between these things. And so all of those things that the body is saying, it's really the limbic body, it's really the limbic brain and the limbic self that is saying all of those things about us not having the time to be able to digest and absorb these nutrients, and about kicking up the adrenaline and the cortisol. All of that is the limbic mind and the limbic body that is saying all of that, okay? And so what I want you to understand from this is that all of what we are talking about in terms of being stressed applies just as much to those who are facing modern day stress factors as it does to those who are facing actual life and death situations. Because at the end of the day, the body and the primitive brain, aka the limbic self, does not know the difference, okay? So are you now understanding why this topic is so important? Because even though you might have half the equation correct, right, aka the right foods and the right amounts and all that kind of stuff, you still won't get the results that you're looking for in your health without the other half. And what is the other half of the equation? Exactly what it is that we just talked about, which is the conscious self and the limbic self, okay? And so the bottom line being for all of this is that our state of being when we are eating is just as important. That is the other half of this equation, which is our state of being. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is what this entire training is going to be about, which is how to eat from that state of being, okay? And so now, after that, you might say, okay, cool. I understand the problem now. I understand that what state that I am in when I am eating matters a lot, right? And I can't be in a limbic state, right? That's not good. I get it. So coach, what's the solution, right? What state should I be in when I am eating? And that, my friend, is a great question. And so that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and talk about right now. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the difference between limbic eating versus conscious eating. Okay, so if you remember back in module 2, we spoke about the big battle that goes on between the conscious self and the limbic self, right? We said that there's a big battle that is always ongoing between these two parts of your brain, right? And then also inside of module number 2, I went ahead and gave you a massive table that highlighted the differences between the limbic self and the conscious self. Now, I'm not going to go through and read all of this, but I just want you to know that it is in the guide as a reference, and it goes ahead and talks about the neuroanatomy difference between the limbic and the conscious self, the different functions of the brain between the limbic and the conscious self, different nicknames for the limbic and the conscious self. All of that is inside of the guide. And then we also talked about the difference in terms of the roller coaster of thoughts and emotions, right? We talked about how the limbic self loves to ride this roller coaster of thoughts and emotions, while the conscious self, when you're in conscious mode, you actually observe your thoughts and emotions, right? This is just a quick summary, right? We talked about all of this already in depth, right? We talked about being in your thoughts versus observing your thoughts. We talked about being in your thoughts versus observing your thoughts. We gave multiple examples for that, okay? And so here is the bottom line of all of this. In every single area of your life, if you are constantly 10 out of 10 max stressed out, limbic mode, then any transformation in your life is going to be challenging. Okay, I'm making it very clear to you right now. You cannot do anything when you are in 10 out of 10 max stressed out limbic mode in any area of your life. It just ain't gonna happen, okay? And so in module 2, when we spoke about this concept, we were talking about it from a psychological standpoint, all about the mind. But guess what? In this training, we're going to be talking about the same concept, but this time it's all going to be about the physiological aspect. Physiologically, all about the body, how is this going to manifest itself? Not psychologically, okay? And so in the same way that we spoke about the conscious mind versus the limbic mind, inside of this training, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the conscious eating versus the limbic eating, okay? And so when you are eating, what state are you coming from? Are you coming from conscious eating or are you coming from a limbic eating perspective, okay? Now, the last point as we dive into exactly how to do conscious eating and all that kind of stuff is that some people might say, man, Coach Yasin, you always bringing up these new topics. Like, man, Coach Yasin, I'm one of those students who loves to argue about points so that way people can think about them, which Mr. or Mrs. Student, I love you because you bring up awesome points. But here's the truth. The student says, hey, here's the thing. Hey, Coach Yasin, why we got to learn about this dang conscious eating thing, right? It's just made up. It's not needed. I ain't never heard about it before. And it wasn't something that our ancestors ever did before. And so why we got to learn about this new random topic that I ain't never heard before, okay? So let me go ahead and address this, okay? Because I addressed this in the last training, but I want to go ahead and hit this from another angle for you so that way this can really cement for you, okay? This is a question. Do you know how long humans have been on Earth for? Okay? In our current being, we've been on Earth for about 200,000 years, okay? So humans have been on Earth for 200,000 years in our current being, okay? How many years? 200,000, okay? Now, my second question for you. Can you guess how long we've had the exact same brain that we have right now? The exact same brain that we have right now. How long have we had that same brain, okay? We have had this same brain for the same 200,000 years. Some people say that, humans have been on Earth for about 6 million years, but in terms of how we've had our brain right now, the exact same brain structure that as you listen to me right now, the same neuroanatomy, we've had the exact same brain structure for 200,000 years, okay? Now, here's my question to you. How much do you think that times have changed in the last 200,000 years? How much? Right? And so to the answer to that question, how much times have changed in the last 200,000 years, everyone likes to say, oh yeah, Coach Yasin, a lot of things have changed in 200,000 years, right? But here's the problem. The problem is that we as humans have short lives and we have even shorter memories, okay? How good is the human memory? We've talked about this a whole bunch of times already. People and humans have terrible memories, okay? And so even though it feels like we've always had internet and smartphones, the truth is that it's been less than 20 years. Even though it feels like we've always had cars, refrigerators, airplanes, and AC, the truth is that it's been less than 100 years, right? And so it's not our fault because the human brain forgets 90% of what it learns in less than just a week, okay? And so never mind a couple years. And so when we say that times have changed, that is an understatement, okay? To say that times have changed is an understatement because here's the truth. For most of human history, the limbic mind helped us stay alive. For most of human history, the limbic mind actually served a very good purpose, okay? Most of human history. However, ideally, because we're no longer in this survival state, we should be making this transition in modern times, okay, just in the last couple decades, to being more conscious. However, that transition is not as easy. And so for that reason, even in modern times, when the threat to survival is no longer as great, most people are still living with their limbic mind in the modern times. And so just like I said in the last training, okay, is if you think that conscious eating and everything that we're about to talk about inside of this training is quote unquote not natural, then please, by all means, continue to ignore it. And then also please let me know when you return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle in which we're on our feet all day long and we're not sitting on our butts in our air-conditioned homes for dozens of hours every single day, okay? And so is it normal to think that because we have a world today that 99% of human history did not live, that we are going to have to learn skills that 99% of humans did not have to learn? The answer is obvious, okay? So now that I've made that point clear, very clear, let's go ahead and answer the question, what's the difference between limbic eating and conscious eating, okay? Now that we've gotten that question out of the way. And that, my friend, is a phenomenal question, okay? And so I've gone ahead and put this table together for you guys in terms of what is the difference between limbic stressed eating and conscious relaxed eating, okay? So real quick, let's go through this. Eating as your limbic self is stressed eating, eating as your conscious self, eating to survive versus eating to thrive. Scarcity, thinking that there is limited food. Again, that is old school thinking. That is old, like, hey, we're still in hunter-gatherer times thinking where there was limited food. We're now living in the modern world. There's unlimited food, okay? That's conscious relaxed eating. Eating unconsciously versus eating consciously. Unconscious to internal signals versus listening to signals. Rigidity, flexibility, reactionary, deliberate, focusing too much on weight versus focusing on health. The scale is who I am, aka my identity, versus the scale is where I am, aka data, okay? Short-term quick fix. If somebody's all obsessed about that, you know that they're going limbic, okay? Long-term solutions, that's the new way, the modern way, okay? Lose weight versus lifestyle change. Guilt, shame versus acceptance and understanding. Deprivation is the limbic stress eating way versus choice is a conscious relaxed way. And then hunger levels, fullness levels, and awareness levels we're going to talk more about later inside of this training, okay? So as you go through this, you're really starting to see there is a very clear divide between limbic stressed eating and conscious relaxed eating, okay? Because conscious eating is when you take control of the steering wheel, right? The steering wheel that we talked about in module 2, where you take control of the steering wheel and instead of eating reactively, okay, and on an impulse, you are eating intentionally and through a deliberate process, okay? That is what conscious eating is all about, okay? And so another diagram to go ahead and really, really, really hit this home for you guys, okay, is that think about this. This person is limbic versus this person is in a conscious, relaxed state, okay? Limbic person, they think the world is about to end. They feel, actually, I should say, not that they think the world is about to end. They feel as though the world is about to end. They're overwhelmed, okay? And so as a result, their limbic self is the one that's controlling the steering wheel and driving the entire ship. Versus the conscious, relaxed state, the guy's just observing his thoughts and emotions. The gal is just observing her thoughts and emotions, okay? And the conscious self is telling the limbic self what to do. And so between these two people, my question to you is, who do you think is going to make better choices? Who do you think is going to have a better physical and mental well-being? Who do you think is going to be more successful in their wellness and honestly in their life in general, right? And so now you understand the difference between being in a limbic, rushed, stressed state. And if you want to go up to the table that we have that massive difference between limbicness and consciousness, you'll be able to see. And then you can specifically apply all of those things now specifically to eating, okay? Now, another point that I want to go ahead and dive into before I talk to you about how to eat consciously is a couple reasons why eating consciously is very, very, very important. Okay, now I'm going to go through these very quickly. Are there many, many more reasons than just 3? 1,000%. Okay, I'm only going to touch on 3 very quickly. However, I'm sure you could come up with dozens and dozens and dozens more on your own. Okay, so really quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm just going to rush through it. Nervous system response. That is reason number 1, okay? There's a lot of pieces to the nervous system. I'm not going to dive into any of those right now because you don't really need to know them. However, what you do need to know is that when somebody is in a limbic stressed response state, what happens is that their sympathetic nervous system turns on. And when their sympathetic nervous system is turned on, the body is ready for fight or flight, and that turns off digestion. Versus when somebody is in a parasympathetic response, their body is relaxed and their digestion is turned on. And so being in a sympathetic limbic state means that your cognitive function decreases, your stress response turns on, and you have less access to creative thinking and problem solving. Versus when you're in a parasympathetic conscious state, your cognitive function increases, your relaxation response is on, your healthy digestion increases, and your calorie burning capacity also increases, okay? Now, I'm not gonna go through all of the details on here. All of the details are in the guide. Again, remember, just as a reference, you don't have to memorize all of this, but I'm just opening your eyes and having those light bulbs go off so that way you can understand more of what it is that we're talking about. Now, next, really quickly, let's talk about reason number 2 of why eating consciously is so important. The second reason is letting your body catch up to your brain, because when you're stuffing your mouth at 1,000 miles per hour, the truth is that your body is not digesting the food and your body is wanting to eat more food. So not only are you stuffing it and cramming your mouth, but on top of that, because the body doesn't know that it's actually full, the brain doesn't know that it's actually full, because it actually takes approximately 20 minutes for the brain to get the signal that it is full. And so when you actually eat from a relaxed, conscious, slowed down state, it allows your brain to catch up with your body and your body to catch up with your brain. And so that is the second reason why eating consciously is so important. And then finally, the third reason that I just want to touch on, remember, there's a lot more than 3 reasons, but I'm just touching on 3 very, very quickly, is that do you know anybody that struggles with digestive issues, with emotional eating, with overeating, with using food to cope with their life? Well, guess what? When you are eating from a relaxed, conscious state, you actually end up tackling most of the problems from their core, okay? And so much of the medical system is about solving symptoms. And so when people are overweight, they say, hey, take this wacky supplement to help you burn fat. When somebody has digestive issues, they say, hey, take this wacky medication to help you fix your stomach, right? When in the end, the core root cause would have actually fixed all of the problems downstream, okay? And what was that root cause? The root cause was the fact that they were eating from a stressed limbic response state, okay? Now, it's very important to understand scope of practice here, okay? Do people actually exist that have proper digestive issues and emotional trauma? Absolutely. Is conscious eating going to solve that for everyone? Absolutely not. And so for those people who have actual medical conditions, that is not in our scope of practice. They need to go see a licensed medical professional. However, what I am saying inside of this section here is that unfortunately, the people who don't actually have a medical condition, they get lumped in with all of those people that do. When in reality, that medical condition that they thought they had was actually because of the fact that they were eating from a stressed limbic response. That's why they have digestive issues. That's why they have emotional eating and all this kind of stuff, okay? And so guess what happens? When the medical system labels somebody with a medical condition, well, guess what? People walk around their entire lives thinking that they have some sort of medical condition. Do you remember the power of belief that we spoke about? Do you remember how powerful beliefs actually are? Even if somebody doesn't have a medical condition, they can think that they have a medical condition because a doctor in a fancy white lab coat told them they have a medical condition, okay? And so remember that guy, he thought he had cancer and because of that, he died, all because of his belief? And so this is why I'm opening your eyes and having light bulbs go off to show you behind the scenes of what is actually going on here, okay? And so bottom line of all of this is that if you're eating from a limbic stressed state, things just ain't gonna work for you well, my friend, right? Your body is not going to function properly and you're not gonna get the most out of the food that you are eating, okay? In fact, the food that you are eating is actually going to cause more problems for you. And gut stress and stress, all of that stuff is a thing, right? If you're stressed out, bottom line, your body is not going to react properly. It's not going to function properly, okay? Now, after all of that, you might say, okay, Coach Yasin, I get it. I have to eat consciously, okay? I now understand that because I'm living in a new world and because I'm living in modern times, I will have to learn different skills to cope and to thrive, right? I get it, Coach, I get it. But what are the skills that the world needs so that way they can consciously eat and not eat from a stressed limbic state? Well, my friend, I have some good news for you, because here at Remote Wellness Academy, we are going to answer all of this for you, okay? So along with the testing, experimenting that we've done throughout all of these years about how to measure and track food, we have also been researching and testing all of the ways to eat consciously in a relaxed state. And we've tested this both on ourselves and with our students, okay? And from that, we have compiled all of that learning into what it is that you're going to learn about in this training, which is the easiest and simplest system possible, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the easiest and simplest ways to eat consciously in a relaxed state once and for all. How? That, my friends, that, ladies and gentlemen, that, boys and girls, is where I would like to introduce you to the 7 tools of conscious eating, okay? Now, are there only 7 tools for conscious eating? Of course not, right? There are literally unlimited tools that somebody can use in order to switch from limbic stressed eating to conscious relaxed eating. However, over the years, these are the 7 tools that we have identified that have proven to have the most amazing results for our students. And so those are the 7 tools that we are going to be discussing very quickly and very briefly inside of this training, so that way you can understand exactly how to switch for yourself and for your students from a limbic stressed rushed response point of view to a conscious relaxed eating point of view, okay? And so this is a visual that we are going to be utilizing throughout this training. Again, remember, do not get overwhelmed. Do not get overwhelmed. This is just for reference. You don't need to memorize this. I'm not going to quiz you. You're not going to have a test. You're not going to have an exam. No student is ever going to ask you and say, hey, you, Mr. or Mrs., what are the 7 tools of conscious eating off the top of your head? Go. It ain't going to happen, okay? So don't stress out about it, and we're going to take it step by step together. Now, before we actually get into the 7 tools of conscious eating, 2 quick points, and then I'm going to let you have a quick break before we actually discuss the 7 tools of conscious eating. The first point that I want to go ahead and make is the difference between theory and practice, okay? Because you might be wondering, how in the world did Remote Wellness Academy, how did they come up with this holistic, in-depth understanding of health and wellness, right? When some people are out there only talking about, calories and macros and metabolism and that kind of stuff, and then they just leave the other half of the equation completely flabbergasted. They have no idea what they're talking about. And then we come over here to Remote Wellness Academy, and not only are they talking about the levels of measuring, not only are they talking about the levels of metabolism, but they have the perfectly well-balanced equation, right? How in the world did they find out about the other half of the equation? And here is the truth. Let me tell you exactly how we found out about it. Is because we experienced it with our students, okay? For so long, we would obsess over the science, about the numbers, and we insisted that nutrition and health was all about just the right foods, which was what to eat, and the right amount of foods, which is how much to eat. Everything you've learned so far, right? But then we'd see in our students, and a couple of things would happen, right? What actually used to happen was either one of 2 things. Number 1, they would either be too stressed out of their brains to even be able to follow the numbers or the calories that they were given, or option number 2 is that even if they did follow the numbers and the calories, they wouldn't see the results. Why? Because of all of the stress that they had in their life, because of the fact that they were eating and living from their stressed limbic self rather than from their relaxed conscious self, okay? And so I want to make this clear for you. It does not matter what you have going on in your life. Even if you do have financial issues right now, even if you do have family issues right now, even if you do have health issues right now, everyone can become conscious, and everyone can shift into becoming their relaxed, conscious self, because it's a state of being, irrespective, independent, irrelevant to what is the external world. Your state of being is the thing that you can control, no matter what is going on external to you, okay? And so this is what no one talks about inside of the industry. I promise you, in your entire career as a remote wellness practitioner, okay, you will see few, if any, people talk about health from both sides of this equation. And so why is it that no one can explain it like this? Is because for most people out there, they've never applied their book smarts and their theories and their degrees and their certifications into the real world. They've never practiced it with real world students, okay? So what you are learning inside of this training is refined from actually helping people transform their lives, okay? What we've been doing over the last 10 years is refining our understanding of these concepts, not in some theoretical laboratory, lock ourselves up into our rooms and then come up with some magical revelation. We have been refining this through application, And we have made sure that everything that what it is that we are talking about isn't some theoretical mojo jojo abstract vague concepts. It's something that is applicable, okay? And so we know all of this, not because we read it in a book, but because we actually did it from real world experience, okay? And so through repetition, it's just the reps, it's just the reps, it's just the reps, it's just the practice. And so as you are going through this process, again, I'm going to hit on this again. Don't get overwhelmed. You're thinking, man, this is the first time I've ever heard about these topics. I'm supposed to master it. Like, come on. Do you think that the first time anybody ever rode a unicycle, they were like, yeah, I'm going to crush riding this unicycle? Or the first time anybody learned how to speak Chinese, they were like, yeah, I'm going to master speaking Chinese, even though I've never spoken a lick of Chinese in my life? The first time you did anything in your life, the first time you learned how to drive a car, the first time you learned how to ride a bike, the first time you learned how to swim, you probably sucked at it. And that's completely normal, okay? If anybody never did anything in their life and said, you know what, I've never done this in my life, but from the very beginning, I'm going to crush it, you'd call that person a crazy person, okay? And so stop holding these expectations over yourself that you're supposed to understand all of this and memorize all of this from day number one, because it ain't going to happen, and that's not how real life works, okay? And so the only way we got to our level of understanding of these concepts is through repetition, through repetition, through repetition. And I promise you, when you stick with this long enough, I'm not even going to say if you stick with this long enough. I'm going to say when you stick with this long enough, the same will be true for you as well. You can hear in my voice how passionate I get about this topic because I really want you to succeed. And I know that the only enemy that you're going to have in this journey is going to be yourself. That man or woman that looks at you back in the mirror, that is what's going to stop you. There is no external obstacle that is going to stop you. I promise you. It is just going to be you yourself and your expectations about the journey, you yourself and your expectations about the process that is going to sabotage you. We've already spoken about this in module number 2, but I want to hit it again and again and again and again. I promise with repetition, you will get better, period, okay? Last point I want to touch base on, and then we can jump into the 7 tools of conscious eating. Why talk about this as so many different tools, right? Why not just have one tool? Why? Because like we've already talked about, module 3 is about having a massive toolbox of understanding so that way you can transform so many people's lives, okay? And so the more tools that you have that are related to conscious eating, the more tools that you can use in order to better help students, okay? And so imagine by the end of module 3, how big is your toolbox going to be in order to be able to help people transform their lives? It's going to be massive. Okay? And so you're going to be able to help a 5-year-old with conscious eating or even somebody who is a nutritionist, okay? And you can help every level in between, okay? This is the value about learning about conscious eating with multiple tools, okay? This is the value of the remote wellness certification that you are going through right now, because you become an asset and you become extremely valuable to every single person that you communicate with. It does not matter if it's a child, it does not matter if it's an expert. You can help transform every human being that you come across because of what you are learning inside of this program. Beautiful, right? It's amazing. Awesome. Cool. So now with that being said, let's go ahead and we're going to hop into the 7 tools of conscious eating. But before we do, I want to go ahead and do a pulse check, okay? Because I do want you to be more like our friend over here who travels the world in his office chair and sees some of the most scenic views. I have no idea how he even gets these office chairs like up to these places. Man, this guy's a G. Like, he must be a real boss. I have no idea how he does this. This must be a feat of human ingenuity. I have no idea. Anyways, pulse check. How are we doing so far? Okay, so this is a good point to actually take a break. Again, remember, you want to digest this. This is the beauty of e-learning, the beauty of online education. You can break this up. I would recommend not necessarily doing this in one sitting. So if you do need a break at this point, go ahead and do so. Take a step away from the computer, come back to this. Feel free to stand up, move around if you need it. So be it, because we are now going to get into the 7 tools of conscious eating. All right, now that you are refreshed and recharged, let's go ahead and hop into the 7 tools of conscious eating. So conscious eating tool numero 1 is called the before 3-point check-in. The before 3-point check-in, okay? That is what conscious eating tool numero 1 is, okay? So the before 3-point check-in is basically where we check in with ourselves on 3 points before we start eating. What are those 3 points? Before we start eating, we ask ourselves 3 questions. Number 1, what day and time is it right now? This is a present moment grounding question. Number 2, why am I eating in this moment? Am I eating out of emotional want or body need, aka setting the intention? And then numero 3, which is who am I right now before I start eating? conscious self or limbic self, okay? And so by asking ourselves these three questions, we can start to get a pulse check on the status of our body and mind before we start eating, okay? So that is the first tool that we can utilize in order to switch to conscious eating, is by asking ourselves these three questions before we start eating, so that way we can ground ourselves, okay? And so this tool by itself helps people change and make better choices when it comes to their eating. And just as a side note, when you think of people who do prayers or supplications before they start eating, really a supplication or a prayer, right, if done consciously and not ritualistically, because unfortunately in today's world with the bureaucratic mainstream religion, so many people do things ritualistically, right? But if you do it actually consciously, then what it's meant to do is it's meant to serve the same purpose as this tool. What it's meant to do is it's meant to ground you, so that way you can become conscious, right? As you say your prayer, as you say your supplication before you actually eat, it grounds you and allows you to become conscious. And then all we're doing with this tool is we're taking that concept and taking it to the next level by getting specific with our consciousness and our intention around these three questions, okay? So I just wanted to go ahead and mention that quick, interesting tidbit about how some people do a prayer or supplication and how it relates to conscious eating as well. Beautiful. So that is conscious eating tool number 1. Why is tool number 1 important? The reason why tool number 1 is important is because by checking in with yourself before you eat, you allow yourself to change state into a more relaxed, conscious state. So that way your body can absorb the nutrients from the food. This allows us to make sure that we are not eating from a stressed limbic state. Even if we did eat properly, we're making sure that we are eating from a relaxed, conscious state. Remember, the reason why we are learning these new skills is because we live in a new time that our ancestors never lived in. And because most people don't have these skills, that is the reason why 74% of adults are overweight, okay? So this is the importance of learning and mastering tool number 1 of conscious eating, and that is the before 3-point check-in. So make sure you're awake with me. I hope you took that break, because I'm going to be going through these quick because they are easy to understand, okay? They're not complicated, and so I'm going to be going through them a lot quicker. So make sure you stay awake with me, and we're going to make sure that we get through these, okay? So that was tool number 1. Let's go through tool number 2, and tool number 2 is called the 20-minute meal. What is tool number 2 called? It's called the 20-minute meal. So the 20-minute meal is when we take note of the time, or we set a timer to track how long that it would take us in order to eat our meal, okay? Now, how do we actually use the 20-minute meal, right? Number 1, does the 20-minute meal have to be 20 minutes? The answer is no, especially in the beginning. The goal is to just keep track of how long it takes to eat our meal and then slowly and gradually work up to 20 minutes. Why 20 minutes? Because like we talked about earlier, it takes about 20 minutes for the brain to get the signal that it is full, okay? And so because that's the time it takes for the brain to get the signal that's full, most of the time when you actually start to do the 20-minute meal, you realize like, dang, when I actually start to track how long it takes me to eat, I never recognize that I literally eat my food in like under 5 minutes, right? And so most students, when they do this, are completely shocked, right? And so my question to you would be, do you think the chances of you overeating from this limbic stressed state are going to be higher when you're eating your meal in under 5 minutes? Of course, right? Because you're stuffing your mouth and you're literally eating as if you're about to die. And so that's exactly what is going to happen, is you're going to stuff your mouth with as much food as possible. And then you're also not going to be as satisfied. And so this is what we're talking about with tool number 2 about conscious eating. So super quick, super easy to understand. That was conscious eating tool number 2, which was the 20-minute meal, aka just setting a timer before we actually eat to track how long we are eating for, okay? Why is it important? Because by setting a timer before we start eating, it forces us to measure the speed at which we eat. And if you remember that quote, we said what gets measured gets managed. Remember I told you that was one of my favorite quotes? What gets measured gets managed. And so automatically by turning on the timer, we will by default take longer to eat because we're now measuring it. Remember the Hawthorne effect? We talked about this before, right? And so when we slow down, we're forcing that state change from a stressed limbic eating to a more relaxed, conscious eating, okay? And just that shift is going to allow us to experience food completely differently. Again, remember, the reason why these are new skills that we're having to learn is because we are living in a new time that 99.9% of humans have never lived in. And so these are the skills that we need to learn in order to adapt to the times that we now live in with unlimited food. So that is why it's important to master tool number 2 of conscious eating. And that was tool number 2, the 20-minute meal. See how we're going through this? They're quick, they're easy, they're applicable, they're practical. Tool number 3, beautiful. Stick with me here. 2 down, only a couple more to go. Tool number 3 is called the during 3-point check-in. So we already talked about the before 3-point check-in, right? We talked about that. But the during 3-point check-in is when we go ahead and do another 3-point check-in while we are eating, okay? And so this is different because we ask different questions. But then Coach Yasin, why repeat it? We literally just did a 3-point check-in from before we started eating. The reason being is because we might have been conscious before we started eating, but because of our unconscious habits about how we've been eating for so long, we might end up inadvertently falling into a rushed limbic state of scoffing that food down because of our old habits. And all of this can happen literally for no reason except for the fact that it's just habit, right? And so this is why having the during 3-point check-in allows us to return to a state of conscious, intentional eating while we are eating, okay? So how do we do the during 3-point check-in? Well, we check in on 3 things. What am I thinking about? How is my body feeling? And what does the food taste and smell like? Senses check-in, thoughts check-in, and body check-in, okay? Let me run you through really quickly what those 3 check-ins would look like. Thoughts check-in. This is when we notice, right? We ask ourselves that question, what am I thinking about? This is when we notice our thoughts that come up around the food that we are eating. Now, these thoughts could be in the form of emotions, they can be in the form of beliefs, they can literally be any thoughts in general, right? And then the thing is that thoughts influence behaviors, especially when they're rooted in diet mentality. And so identifying those unhelpful thoughts, at least observing them, gives us a chance to be able to challenge or reframe them, right? I give you an example inside of the guide about the first time I actually mixed ketchup and mayonnaise, right? And so when I first did that, I was like, what are my thoughts around that, right? I didn't like it. But then as I ate it, my wife introduced me to it and I was like, okay, wait a second. It actually tastes just like the Chipotle sauce that I really, really love. I just didn't love mixing it together, right? Second, body check-in. This is where we actually go ahead and notice how our body is feeling, right? Especially around hunger and fullness scales, okay? And so we're deciding, okay, when am I hungry? When am I full, right? We talked about this in the previous training and we're going to touch on it again later inside of this training. Again, just realizing, wait a second, how is my body right now? Am I full? Am I hungry? What's actually going on there? That's the second check-in. And then the third 3-point check-in is the senses check-in. And this is where we actually say, let me see. Can I actually even taste the food that I'm eating? Can I actually even smell the food that I'm eating? You will be surprised how many times when we are in limbic, stressed, rushed eating mode that we don't even taste the food that we are eating because we're eating so fast, okay? And then I give another example in the guide about that as well, okay? So bottom line for this, when we do this during 3-point check-in, we can start to become a little bit more aware of our awareness level, our eating awareness, okay? We don't want to be at 1, where we're super zoned out in like a zombie mode. We're not tasting every single bite, right? And we don't want to be at a 10 where we're super critical and thinking about every calorie and all that kind of stuff. We want to be at an even 5 where we're aware in the moment and savoring the food, but not obsessing over the food as well, right? So it's a very nice balance in between there, okay? Now, I do want to go ahead and emphasize here that awareness and consciousness while we are eating is really just a North Star. Do not beat yourself up about it, okay? It's just an ideal guiding star, okay? Remember what we talked about binary thinking and continuum thinking when we talked about what to eat, right? We talked about high quality foods, low quality foods. It's not black or white. There's unlimited number of options, right, in between. In the same way, this mental model of binary thinking versus continuum thinking, right? It's not black or white. It's how black or white is it, right? And so the question is not, am I conscious while I am eating or not, right? That's a question that a lot of amateurs, a lot of beginners might ask themselves, and they are stuck in binary thinking, which is not how you want to be. You don't want to be thinking in black or white, right? Because when you think in black or white, there's only 2 options, right? Instead, the mental model, as you start to apply it, the question you want to ask yourself is, how conscious am I while I am eating? You see the difference between those 2 questions? Because when you ask this question, you start to see the world in colors and you realize that there are unlimited options on this continuum in terms of how conscious I am versus how limbic I am, okay? And so it's not black or white. And so do not beat yourself up going binary and thinking of it in black and white and be like, oh man, I wasn't conscious. Oh man, I was conscious. That's not how it works, okay? Instead, you got to manage this continuum, and it's always something that we're going to be working on. It's not something you just fix, one and done, problem solved. No way. And so if you find yourself stuck in binary thinking, it's very important to realize that that probably means that you're going limbic. Because binary thinking is something that the limbic mind does, the subconscious mind does, in order to not have to think. But then when you go continuum thinking, that's more conscious mind, conscious self thinking as well. Okay, so ultimately, the more often you do the 3-point check-ins, you're going to notice yourself naturally becoming more mindful. And so it's just a very good tool to keep inside of your practice and apply it when you remember to. Okay, so that was tool number 3 of conscious eating. Again, it's very important that you can apply that while you are eating. So that way, even if you ended up through habit eating in a rushed, very fast pace, you can catch yourself while you are eating and take yourself out of that fight or flight limbic mode, and you can start to revert back to eating more consciously. Okay, remember, all of these are tools that we're having to learn new because of the new time that we live in. And that is why it's very important to master tool number 3 of conscious eating, which was the during 3-point check-in. All right, so you are doing a phenomenal job of sticking with me as we go through these 7 tools. Remember, I told you we were going to go through these faster than normal because they're very easy and snappy to understand. So we've gone ahead and knocked out 3. We only got 4 more. You're doing a phenomenal job. Stick with me here. And tool number 4 is going to be a simple one because it's just called fork down. What is fork down? Well, exactly how it sounds. Fork down is when we actually put our fork or whatever utensil that we were using to eat down in between the bites that we take, okay? And so putting our fork down every time we take a bite forces us to slow down and break that automatic eating pattern in which we are eating on autopilot. Why? Because we talked about when we eat too fast, we take in more food than we realized. And as a result of that, we might be eating more than we want to eat, or even foods that we might not want to eat, right? Now, keep in mind, this is very important. Yes, I know fork down is a simple tool, but remember, small hinges open big doors. Do not discredit this tool because most people end up going through life looking for the big secret, right? When the truth is that in life, it's really all about the simple things, but they're not always easy, right? And so most people confuse 2 concepts: simple versus complex, easy versus hard, okay? Most of life is simple, but not necessarily easy. Remember that, okay? And so people assume, come on, it can't be that simple. But the truth is, it is. And so stop looking for the magic pill and get busy doing the simple but hard things in life, okay? And so this tool of putting your fork down between bites goes along with the 20-minute meal because it helps to contribute to us slowing down while we are taking the 20 minutes or whatever time it is to eat our meal, okay? And so this is what we are doing. Does that make sense? And so you're starting to see how all of these tools actually work together. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, was tool number 4 of conscious eating. The reason why tool number 4 is important is because it's another tool in our toolbox that we can use in order to slow down. And then over time, the more that we practice it, the more automatic it's going to become for us. And naturally, you're just going to put your spoon down. You're going to put your fork down. You put a bite in your mouth. Put your spoon down, put a bite in your mouth, put your fork down. And so naturally, it allows to become that cue that allows us to switch from rushed, stressed, limbic eating to slow, relaxed, conscious eating. Now, did our ancestors care about putting their fork down between bites? No, because they didn't have any utensils. And so as a result, I'm literally hitting this on every single point. These are new skills that society has to learn because we are living in new times that has only come about in the last couple decades. And that's why we are having to learn all of these new skills, okay? So this is why it's important to master tool numero 4 of conscious eating, which was putting your fork down between bites. Now, let's jump over to tool number 5. You're doing a phenomenal job. We only got 3 left, so we're doing great here. Tool number 5 of conscious eating is breathing between bites. What is it? It's called breathing between bites. And so exactly how it sounds, it means that you are consciously breathing and focusing on your breath as you are eating. Why? Because when you breathe more, you burn more. And so everything just works better when you actually breathe better, okay? And so many times when we're stressed, you might not even realize it, but not only have you holding your breath, but on top of that, sometimes what ends up happening is your heart rate is through the roof and you're taking these quick and shallow breaths, right? And so these are the typical responses that ends up happening when we're in that stressed limbic eating mode, okay? But here's the truth. Oxygen is actually key in the digestion process, and a lot of times it gets ignored when people are all about talking about calories and macros, and that's the only thing they're talking about, right? And so your poor stomach, your poor digestive system, when you are not breathing, right, and you're all stressed out, this is what's happening. It's asking for help. But when you're actually breathing, you're consciously breathing, you're focusing on your breath, your body and your digestion in your stomach is getting enough oxygen, and it's in a happy, happy, happy state. And so the bottom line of this is that when you increase oxygen, your stomach and intestines have an easier time absorbing nutrients from the food, and your nutrition absorption increases when you have plenty of oxygen. And when you have limited oxygen, aka when you're stressed out, it decreases, okay? Now, next question. How do you actually use breathing between bites for conscious eating? Okay? Because most people don't know how to breathe. Facts. Now you might say, but Coach Yasin, what are you talking about? If we didn't know how to breathe, how would we be alive? Yes, I know. But there's a difference between breathing and breathing. Breathing means taking deep breaths and allowing your chest, your diaphragm, to expand and then slowly exhaling. Okay, so when you do this properly, every exhale should feel like you're releasing stress and tension out of your body. Okay, and that's exactly the point. Now, how many times should you be taking a deep breath in between every single bite? 3 times. Yep. Take 3 breaths in between each bite and see what happens to your stressed limbic response eating. I guarantee you'll find yourself automatically switching into a relaxed conscious response, and when you start focusing on breathing in between your bites. You're welcome. Mind blown. And so you can start to see how you put your fork down, you breathe 3 times. All of this is kind of like a system and tools that all work together inside of the toolbox to really facilitate and cultivate conscious eating. Okay, so why is tool number 5 important? Because of the fact that when you focus on breathing, it's going to change your entire physiology when you are breathing while you are eating. Okay, not only does the body absorb the nutrients better, but you will also feel better. Okay, and it's going to allow you to really start to eat deliberately. Okay, now to all of those naysayers, did our ancestors have to worry about focusing on their breathing while they were eating? No, okay? Because they're too busy running away from the dang lion. Duh. And so again, this is a new tool that we as a civilization, we as a human species need to learn. And that really is the goal with here at RWA in this curriculum, is that as you start to learn this, you can start to spread it and we can start to get this information more out to the masses. So that way, really everyone can learn these new skills that they need to learn in order to live as a functioning, prospering, thriving adult in the new civilization. Okay, so that is why 74% of adults are overweight, because they need help with all this stuff. Okay, so that's why it's important to learn and master tool number 5, which is conscious eating. You're doing phenomenal. Let's go ahead and hop into tool number 6. We only got 2 more left. You're doing great. Stick with me. Stick with me here, okay? Tool number 6 of conscious eating is called chewing. Now you hear that and you're like, what is he talking about? Chewing? Come on, man. Like chewing, we know how to chew. Hear me out for a second. As I always say, when you eat too quickly, here's the thing. The body doesn't have enough time to think that it ate enough. And what does this lead to? It leads to the brain saying, oh, you know what? We didn't eat enough. We must eat more. Because when you eat quickly, that signal hasn't been sent to the brain. Remember, it takes 20 minutes for that signal to get sent to the brain, so that way the brain knows that we're full, right? And so the body doesn't think that it ate enough. And when it doesn't experience any pleasure from eating, immediately what the body does and what the brain does is it reaches out to more food in which we can actually experience pleasure and fullness from. And so that is all because we ate too fast. And so your body loves meals that include timing and breathing. And so how are we going to give it more time and how are we going to give it more breath? Answer, one of those tools is by chewing more. And chewing is powerful, but it's extremely, extremely ignored in the digestive process, because the thing is that chewing has a lot of advantages. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are in the guide again. And remember, it sends signals to our body for digestion, starts the secretion of hormones, activates taste receptors, prepares your stomach lining so that way it can actually, the secretion of hydrochloric acid. A lot of people feel like they get stomach burns when they eat. It's because they're not chewing their food enough, right? It prepares your pancreas for the secretion of enzymes, helps the digestion. And so many people complain about digestion and stomach issues, when in reality, if you look at how they're eating, they literally barely chew and they literally scoff down the food as if they're inhaling it, okay? And then on top of that, here's a crazy fact. The more you chew your food, the sweeter and tastier it gets. Why? Because saliva releases these enzymes that makes the food taste better when you chew it more, okay? And so if you constantly practice chewing your food, then you'll be amazed at how much better your digestion works and how much less you actually need to eat and how much more energized you feel. All of this because not only do you slow down, but you also were able to grind up the nutrients in the food so your body could absorb those properly, okay? Now, the next question that you might have, and I know I'm going fast through these because they're simple, they're easy to get, they're very snappy. But if you need to slow them down, when I get excited, sometimes I talk very fast. So if you got to slow this down, feel free to do so. But I'm just going through them quick because remember, reference, not memorizing. We're going to get through this quick, okay? How to actually chew your food for conscious eating. Well, for many of us, chewing is really a new phenomenon because most people just end up cutting up and breaking up their food with their teeth and then swallowing it. They don't actually chew their food, okay? And so in order to get into the habit of chewing, the guideline is that you should chew each single bite of food that you take about 20 to 30 times. 20 to 30 times? Coach Yasin, that's a lot. Yep. And I know that might sound like a lot, but trust me, just like everything in life, you're going to get used to it very quickly and it's going to become a habit, okay? And so this is really where putting your fork down, breathing between bites, all of that you see comes together because you put your fork down, you take a couple bites, you do your 20 to 30 chewing, and then boom, you're back onto the next bite. And so it really becomes a holistic system once it becomes a habit for you, okay? Now, the other question is, does chewing this many times only apply to when I have like freaking 20 minutes or 50 hours to eat my food? The answer to that is no, okay? This does not only apply when you have a lot of time to eat. Even if you only have 5 minutes to eat, life happens. It's okay. We know sometimes you got to rush and you got to eat, you got to get some food in, right? Even if you only have 5 minutes to eat, allowing this act of chewing to allow you to relax is also extremely beneficial, right? It's almost like when somebody meditates and they focus on their breath. Instead of you focusing on your breath, right, which is another thing you can do while you eat, what you can do is you can use your chewing as kind of like a meditative practice to help you get calm and relaxed, right? And so when you do it this way, you'll find that even with just 5 minutes that you have to eat, you feel so much more satisfied. And so this is the reason why tool number 6 of conscious eating is so important, because it helps you switch from that fast limbic eating state to that slow conscious eating state. Because when you chew more, you'll find that it allows your body to digest and absorb the food better, and you will get better results from the food that you eat. Again, this is another new skill that we have to learn from the new times that we live in. And because the vast majority of the world does not understand these skills, 74% of adults in the US are overweight. And this is why tool number 6 of conscious eating is important. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you've done phenomenal here, because we are now on tool number 7, the last of the proven tools that we have tested with our students here at RWA for conscious eating. Again, remember, I know I'm going through these quick. When I get excited, I tend to talk fast, but you're doing a phenomenal job sticking with me through this. Tool number 7 of conscious eating is called the hunger and fullness scale. Now, the first thing you might say is, hunger and fullness scale? Coach Yasin, we spoke about this before. Yes, we spoke about it as one of the levels when you measure and track your food, right? Now, although this is similar, what we're going to do is we're actually going to apply this concept differently when we talk about how to eat. Because here's the truth. When you eat until you're about 80% full, you walk away from the table and feel energized instead of weighed down, okay? This alone, this tool right here alone is a game changer for so many people. But here's the problem and why people are unable to actually apply this properly. And so I'm going to kind of expand even more than what it is that we talked about in the previous training. I'm going to expand this a little bit more for you, because there is a difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger, okay? And so many people do not know the difference between the two, and I do not want you to be one of those people, so I'm gonna explain to you the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger, okay? So emotional hunger is typically more of like a feeling. It's something that you feel in your chest or in your heart, right? It's like when you're coming from a place of stress, when you're kind of coping, when you're coming out of habit, when you're coming out of boredom. All of those are typically emotional hunger. And a lot of people confuse it. They're like, oh man, I'm dieting and I just got hungry all the time. It's not that they were hungry. It's because they were feeling that emotional hunger out of habit, out of coping, out of boredom. Versus physical hunger is more of a sensation, something that you feel, a sensation in the stomach. And it's like a light growl. You feel that lack of fuel, right? And so this is why it's so important for you and your students to reacquaint themselves with the true definition and the true feeling of physical hunger, because most people have actually forgotten what it feels like to actually feel physical hunger, okay? Now, related to hunger and fullness, the other question that sometimes people ask is, well, why do we emotionally eat, right? Why is it that we emotionally eat? And the reason why we emotionally eat is the same reason why people drink alcohol and the reason why people take drugs when they are stressed or having difficulty in life. It's a coping tool. It's a coping mechanism. And so in the same way, food is also a coping tool. Food is also a coping mechanism. Why? And this is what people don't understand. This is very important for you as a remote wellness practitioner to understand. Because food changes our brain chemistry just like drugs do. I'm going to say that again. Food changes our brain chemistry just like drugs do. And to really hit this point home, okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you an image right now. And I'm going to go ahead and put a trigger warning on the screen, okay? I'm about to show you an image that some people might find triggering, okay? So if you have had past experience with drugs, just skip a few minutes ahead so that way you can skip this section so that way it doesn't trigger you in any way, shape, or form, okay? However, the reason why I'm showing you this is because this is the image that you need to understand so you can understand how big of a problem emotionally eating and food addiction actually is. Because the bottom line is this, like I said, food changes brain chemistry just like drugs. There is no difference mentally, psychologically, neurochemically between food and drugs. Drugs just as a heightened version of that, okay? And so when we talk about sugar, same thing. Food, same thing, right? All of this becomes an addiction, okay? And so this is why I want to show you this. I know it's a little bit tough to see. It's like, yo, this is serious. This is very, very serious. And people don't recognize that food changes brain chemistry just like drugs do, okay? And so this is why food addiction is a thing. And so the first time in human history, people are dying from too much food. Imagine that. For the first time in human history, for those people who tell me that times haven't changed and we should still live like back in the day, what are you talking about? For the first time in human history, people are dying from what used to be a scarce resource. They're dying from too much food. For the first time in human history, your food is more dangerous than gunpowder. Think about that, okay? And so this is why it's so important to understand what it is that we are talking about in this training, so you can understand the difference between emotional eating and actually feeling hunger, okay? And now the last side topic that I want to talk to you about very quickly is about separating and differentiating between when you coach and you help men and women differently inside of your remote wellness practice because of the way that individual genders' brains work, okay? So this is going to be especially important for your journey right now, is that inside of your remote wellness practice, you're going to have students that are both men and women. And as a result, you're going to have to coach slightly differently depending on the reasons why men and women are eating or not eating, okay? So what I want to do here for a second is I want to get very real with you. I want to open up your eyes to something that has been hidden within our society for far too long. Because here's the truth. Women for a very, very long time, for centuries, have been told to hide their appetite and that their appetite is destructive. And then men, on the other hand, for centuries have been told, hey, a beer belly is acceptable and eating a lot of food is just what men just do. And so you can see here that the reason why women have an issue with not eating enough, and the reason why typically, remember this is typically, it's a very broad stroke, but it is typically what you will notice, and this is why it's important to differentiate and delineate between the two. That's why I'm talking to you about it, is that typically men will eat more. And so it's very important to understand the truth behind what the actual problem is, because if you go out on social media and you only read the headlines and you don't understand history and you don't understand data, you come up to a very different conclusion of why this actually is. So why is it important to know what the actual real problem is, and why and how are you going to implement this inside of your remote wellness practice? Well, let me go ahead and explain. The reason why it's important to know the real problem behind behind why men are told one thing and women are told another thing is because until you get to the real root cause of the problem, you can't actually come up with a real solution. And so here is a life principle that you must understand. Okay, Einstein once said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution, because he believed that the quality of the solution that you generate is in direct proportion to your ability to identify the problem that you are trying to solve. In other words, what does that mean? It means that the quality of the solution that you generate is equal to the quality of understanding that you have of the problem. And so when you want to try to understand gender roles in society, it's a very sensitive topic, it's a very complex topic, but it's very important to understand the root cause behind it, because when we focus on solving the right problem, guess what? You're actually going to find the right solution that actually works. And so inside of your remote wellness practices, it's very important for you to understand the real problem behind what is actually going on, right? What is the real problem behind why women have been told for centuries to quote unquote hide their appetite and that their appetite is destructive? And what's the real problem behind why men have been expected to have big appetites and that their appetite should be large? What is the real reason behind it, right? You want to spend some time thinking about this, but I'm going to make it easy for you, because the real reason, bottom line, the real problem is that times have changed, okay? For most of human history, we're talking about 100,000 BC to probably the 2000s, and then now we have modern times. And so the world has changed more in the last few decades than in the entire human history combined. Think about how insane that is, right? And so do you not think that the gender roles and how we were actually speaking to men and women over the course of the entire human history and the way we got used to talking to men and women would have changed because now all of humans have literally changed in the times that we live in? Probably, right? And so the problem here is exactly the same problem that I talked about before. Humans have short lives and even shorter memories. Because here is the bottom line truth. For most of human history, gender roles actually helped humans survive. It's literally how we are wired. Remember the exact same brain that we've had for 200,000 years? Well, remember we talked about it. Do you think that times have maybe changed in 200,000 freaking years? Of course, right? And so maybe the way that we're living now isn't the same as it was 200,000 years ago. Maybe. And so for the vast majority of human history, men and women survived together by dividing and conquering. Think about that. There has never been a time in human history in which we have had this much abundance and luxury. Ever. There has never been a time in human history in which men and women did not need each other as much as in today's time for the sake of survival. Now remember, there is such a thing as masculine energy, feminine energy, and the inner need for how we are wired. But what I'm talking about here is I'm not talking about the psychological need. What I'm talking about is the need in terms of survival, right? Because before modern times, it was really all just about survival for both men and women. Life was hard. And this is why women were told not to have an appetite and men were told to eat a lot. Life used to be about life and death for most of the population. And so if people actually read history and data instead of only their social media headlines, they would see that this actually applies to all areas of life, not just food. The same goes for why women were told to have less of an appetite for food for centuries. The same goes for why men were told to have more of an appetite for food for centuries. The reason goes back related to survival. The same goes for why women were told to focus on the home rather than going out and making money. And the same goes for why men were told to focus on making money instead of working from home. This reason goes back to survival. And so humans are very, very good at survival. Literally, we're the top of the food chain for a reason. We survived over 6 million years, definitely over 200,000 years, because we are very good at survival. We make up rules that allow us to survive. And so the problem is that modern day world is no longer about survival. And we as a human species just have not caught up yet with what it means to live in a modern world of abundance. We have this brain that is hardwired to live 200,000 years ago, and yet we have all of these other amenities and these other luxuries. And so we are living in a time that is a very confusing time. How do we come to terms with our human wiring And yet we come to terms with the external reality. And so raising young men and women with the ways of thinking that no longer apply to our modern world is not right and does not prepare them for the success in the real world, right? We need to equip young men and women, young boys and girls with the understanding that, hey, you're wired so-and-so way. However, the external world has changed and your brain just hasn't caught up. It's still wired to 200,000 years ago, right? And so is getting rid of all of the evil people at the top somehow going to fix this problem? It's not. Because all of a sudden, we're just going to replace those people with more people who are living in limbic survival mode. People who don't understand that, wait a second, we have this conscious brain and we have this limbic brain, and there's a difference between the two, and there's a clash between the two, and that for most of human society and for most of human history, we lived a certain way because of the fact that it was all about survival. And so just like we learned in module 2, what is the solution? The solution is for mankind, for the human species to become conscious and to evolve via the becoming process. For as long as humans are limbic and sleepwalking through life, we will continue to deal with these issues, especially when we are unconscious to them. And so as a side note, it's very, very good for you to know as an RWA student is that this is the mission for the Remote Wellness Academy. This is why the more people that we can get on board with RWA's becoming process, the more people that we can wake up to their conscious selves, the more people that we can educate and spread this word of the message that we are giving you inside of this program, the more people who can become aware of this, the faster that we can help people change their identity and become conscious, and the faster that we can create societal change around the world. But how are we going to do that? We are going to do that through the students of the Remote Wellness Academy. We are going to do that through you as a remote wellness practitioner, because you are going to go out and spread this understanding of the human mind, that times have changed, that there are different skills that we must have. You're going to go and spread this to all of your students. And so we have students here at RWA, and then you're going to have students. And so in this way, we can spread this message of consciousness, of understanding the limbic mind, of really waking up to the times that we are in and not living and sleepwalking through life, not living and sleepwalking and eating our way through life. And so this is ultimately what the mission of the Remote Wellness Academy is. Do you now see our diabolical plan here at RWA in order to change the world? Shh, don't tell anybody, okay? And so the bottom line of all of this is this. It's time that we focused our energy on tackling the real problem, right? When you have students that are men and you have students that are women, the hardwiring in the brains, there is a difference because of how we have been programmed over the course of 200,000 years for the sake of survival. And so times have changed. And so humans are not prepared or equipped and definitely not taught properly in school how to become conscious, how to not live limbically, how to evolve, and how to become their version 2.0 selves. They're just not. And so for women, when it comes to food, they've been told their entire lives that having an appetite is bad and that they shouldn't eat. And so for men, when it comes to food, they've been told their entire lives that they should eat more and have a big appetite. And so when you have students who are women, it's absolutely critical for you to keep this in mind. When you have students who are men, it's absolutely critical for you to keep this in mind. You will need to be supportive to them about this, because both men and women, for the first time in history, are looking for freedom when it comes to eating. We are no longer eating for survival. We are eating to thrive. And here is what you can do, and this is what you can tell your students to help them understand. The beautiful thing, this is what you can tell them, this is what you can tell yourself, and this is what I am telling you, is that the beautiful thing is that we no longer have to be prisoners of this jail cell that society has created, okay? The threat of life and death from old times no longer exists. And so that jail cell that we think that we are in is the one that we have created inside of our own minds. Because here's the truth. We get to decide to open the jail cell door. We get to decide that, you know what? We can actually consider the possibility that our appetites might actually be right and good, right? We have the key to our freedoms. You can tell the students, you have the key to your freedom, right? You have the power to free yourself from false beliefs like, if I let myself eat whatever I want, I'm going to eat everything in sight. If I let myself make an amazing income, if I let myself make an amazing amount of money, then I'm going to be a horrible person that doesn't care about other people. Right? None of these false beliefs are true for either men or women. They were true at a point when we were living in, for most of human history, in scarcity limbic times, the way that our brains have been wired, but it is no longer the case anymore, okay? And so if you learn what we are talking about here and you become conscious when you eat, you will not eat everything in sight. And so my question for those students who carry these beliefs is, what if eating what you wanted wasn't bad for you? What if letting go of that baggage that society has told you for so long, what if you could let go of all of that, right? Because remember this, most of society is limbic and continues to live life as if we are still living in scarcity survival times. You do not have to listen to them anymore. Okay. And so this is, I know, a side topic, but it's a very important side topic that I did want to go ahead and talk to you about, because this is really how you start to be able to craft the nuance when you have students that are female, when you have students that are male, when you have students that are men and women. You can start to be able to help them exactly with what is inside of their minds and help them transform in a way that nobody else would have been able to do so. Okay. And so now that you understand emotional hunger and physical hunger, let's talk about how to actually use it, okay? So I'm going to go through this very quickly because it's the last tool, because like you have already been familiar with in the hunger and fullness scale activity in the previous training, so this is going to feel familiar to you, except in this training, we're actually going ahead and providing you a scale. So this is a very good, helpful thing. You can read through this. It's a very good thing to go ahead and include. And then also, when it comes to hunger and fullness and slowing down, another fun activity that you can do is, let's say you're eating out with friends and you can play, hey, first person to finish eating loses, right? So it's like the opposite. So you can actually play a fun game with everyone in order to slow down eating. And honestly, you don't even have to tell anyone that you're playing that game. You can literally just play it alone in your head and watch and see what happens, right? And so that's just a fun activity I just want to go ahead and mention as we close out this last tool over here, okay? So back to what it is that we're talking about. I know we took a little bit of a detour there, but I thought it was very important for us to mention. Why is tool number 7 important? The reason why it's important is because once you are in tune with your real hunger and fullness, we will not have to be prisoners and victims to emotional limbic hunger anymore. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why it's important to learn tool number 7 of conscious eating. All right, to close out this training, let's go ahead and talk about all 7 tools combined. Look at that. Look at how far you've come. Do you now see why this topic was so important, right? Because if a student comes to you and says, yes, I am eating healthier, but I don't feel any better, I can't seem to lose the fat. Obviously, first you're going to check that they are eating the right foods and eating the right amounts. But the next most important immediate thing you're going to check is their eating speed. You're going to check, hey, maybe they're eating too fast. Because typically when you're eating limbically, that's what you're doing. You're scoffing down the food and you're eating fast. That's like the number one sign, okay? And so are they eating in a relaxation conscious response, or are they eating from a stressed limbic response, okay? And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between what you are learning inside of this program and where everyone else stops when they talk about macros and calories and all that kind of stuff. Do you now see why this topic really is the other half of the equation? And then on top of that, you can really start to combine all of these tools, right? We talk about the 7 tools. You can combine them, right? Before you start eating, do the check-in. Set the timer for 20 minutes. Make sure you do the 3-point check-in during that time. In that 20-minute meal, put your fork down, breathe, chew, check on your hunger and fullness levels. And so really it is a toolbox that you can put together. And remember, don't beat yourself up. Don't get stuck in binary thinking. It's not, am I conscious or am I not conscious? It's how conscious am I? And so I'm going to go ahead and put inside of the guide really quickly as a reference all of the different things on here. Before your meal, this is what you could do. During your meal, this is what you can do. After your meal, this is what you can do. Share what you appreciated about your meal. All of these are things that will contribute to having a more conscious experience when you are eating. Do you see now how this is such a different way to eat? Do you see now the true difference between limbic eating and conscious, relaxed eating? It's a big difference, right? It's a very, very big difference. Final note on here, one at a time. Make sure that when you are including this with your students, you actually do this one at a time. Don't try to do all of them at once. Why? You don't want to overwhelm people, okay? Remember, meet the student where they are at. The more change someone needs, the less they can handle. But then, if that's the student, you might say, oh no, but Coach Yasin, I'm overwhelmed. This was a lot. Another long training. What's going on here? Hear me out for a second. That's just your limbic brain. It doesn't like to go out of its comfort zone, okay? You can break this training up if you need to. It's awesome. It's no problem. We're going to help you push past that point of overwhelm. Because did you really think that you were going to become a master practitioner of the domain of health by only knowing one or two tools of conscious eating? Probably not, right? And so I'm going to hold you to a higher standard. You can do this. I do believe in you. You do got this. Yes, I know this is a lot of content, but as you become a world-class remote wellness practitioner, you're going to be so happy that you talked about this, okay? Next, will I talk to my student about this as multiple tools? Again, remember, I understand this might seem complex to you right now. Again, remember, it's just a reference, but you will not speak to your students in this way initially. You're not going to go ahead and do this to them. You're going to do it break by break by break, and you're going to learn more about this in Module 5, where we give you all the templates, swipe files, copy and paste, plug and play programs, so that way it is effortless for you after you get your certification, okay? Beautiful. Let's go ahead and close out this training with the activity. We're going to go ahead and talk about the 6-day conscious eating challenge. In this activity, we're going to go ahead and practice the tools of conscious eating together all in one challenge. This activity is important because what it's going to do is going to encompass all of the main trainings, because what it's going to do is going to encompass all of the main learnings from this training and help you solidify this in your understanding, okay? So just remember, because this is the only activity in this training, we are going to do this for the full 6 days. Remember, do not skip this for yourself. Don't do it for the dang certification. I already told you. I do not like traditional education in which they force you to do things for things that don't matter. Certifications and degrees and stuff, none of that matters. I'm telling you right now, none of that matters. Do it because of the experience. The experience is what is going to have the biggest impact on your income. That is the reason why you want to be doing these activities and you want to do them fully, not because of the dang certification, okay? You should care about your experience more than the certification. The certification is just an added perk, because the better you are with your experience and the more you can share with your students, the more it's going to impact your ability to make an income from this. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop over to the quick mini training that's going to talk about the 6-day conscious eating challenge. All right, welcome to this quick mini training about the 6-day conscious eating challenge. Just a quick reminder, just like all of the templates and worksheets we provide inside of the Academy, make sure you go to File, make a copy, so that way you can have your own copy of this challenge and this worksheet. We cannot allow all students to edit the same copy. Now, just like all of the 6-day activities inside of the program, this activity is divided up into 2 parts. The first part is the 3-day observation, and then the second part is the actual 3-day experiment. And so this specific activity / challenge has 3 pages altogether. So we got the instructions page, and then we got the worksheet page for the observation, and then we got the worksheet page for the experiment. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about that right now, and then we'll go ahead and dive into it so that way you know exactly how to actually complete this challenge. So for part 1, which is the 3-day observation, what you're going to do, just as always, you're not going to make any changes to your current eating speed. And instead, in the first 3 days, what you're going to just do is you're just going to observe and you're going to note, okay? So on the worksheet below, which I'll show you here in a second, for the first 3 days, what you're going to do is you're going to mark what time you started eating your meal, and then what time you ended eating your meal, and then the total time that elapsed, okay? AKA how long it took for you to eat, okay? And then also in the worksheet below, you're going to notice things about your breathing, about your chewing, and about your hunger and fullness, okay? So you're not going to change anything. You're just going to notice and observe. However, as you're going to start to see with all of these observations is that just the fact that you are tracking, remember what gets measured gets managed, is that subconsciously, without you even knowing, you're automatically going to be starting to make changes. But do your best, try not to make any changes because you just want to get a good baseline of where you are starting. Okay, so remember, don't change anything. All you're doing is just observing and noting. That is all. Okay, so let me show you what the worksheet of this is going to look like. I'm going to scroll down to the second page here. And so on the second page, you got meal number 1. Okay, so we changed it from breakfast to meal number 1 because some students said they don't eat breakfast. So whatever meals you're going to have, right? Meal 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter what time you have them. Breakfast for some people could be at like 1 p.m. For me, that's typically around like 12:30 I eat breakfast. But again, doesn't matter. Meal number 1. You're going to write down what time you started eating. So let's say, for example, like, 11:29 a.m., right? And then what time you ended eating. So let's say like 11:35 a.m. And then elapsed time is going to be 6 minutes. And then I'm just going to write some observations here about what I noticed in terms of if I was conscious, if I wasn't conscious, how often I chewed, that kind of stuff, okay? That's for day 1, meal number 1. Same thing for meal 2, meal 3, and you're going to be doing this for 3 days. Okay. Now, couple points on here. Remember, this is 100% customizable. Don't be remote control. You can understand the point of this exercise, and then that way you can start to, if you need, adapt it. But in some cases, if you're like, you know what, maybe the time that I start eating isn't as helpful, you can just set a timer that is like a count up timer and then write down how long it took you to eat. The reason why I would still recommend and I would urge you to do the program and this activity the way that we have it outlined is because when you have this data of what time you started eating, that is actually very helpful to see. So you can say like, okay, man, I'm looking at this. I never noticed that I actually eat breakfast at like, 2:30 p.m. or that's my first meal of the day or whatever, right? And so you'll start to get these trends and these data points when you actually track this data here. And so that would be my recommendation, is that do it this way. I wouldn't recommend changing it, but I can see where some students would want to do it that way. But however, my strong recommendation is just do it the way that we have it outlined on here. And then after that, after you've completed those first 3 days, you're going to go over to the second 3 days, and that is the experiment piece of this. And in the second 3 days, you're going to start to experiment and make changes to your eating speed, okay? And what you're going to do is you're really going to work based off of your baseline. And this is why the observation is so important, is because from the observation, all you're going to do is you're slightly going to increase, so that way it helps you to slow down. Do not bump it up to like 20 minutes off the bat, okay? So if you normally eat lunch in like 5 minutes, you bumping it up to 20 minutes is going to feel difficult and it's going to feel like a lot. So if you're eating breakfast or lunch in 5 minutes, make it 10. If it's normally 10 minutes, bump it to 15, right? Go in increments and you can increase throughout the days if necessary. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then the other thing you're going to do is you can go ahead and pick 1 to 2 other tools of conscious eating that you learned from the main training, and you're going to go ahead and experiment with those as well, right? So we got the 7 tools right there. And remember, you want to just kind of pick one by one. If you're struggling with slowing down already, maybe trying to do all 7 all at once is not very good for you. But if you find that, you know what, okay, from my timing perspective, I got it down. I can understand the timing and I'm doing pretty good on the timing. But you know what, I want to start focusing now on putting my fork down. I want to start doing my 3-point check-ins. I want to start doing the chewing. I want to start doing the hunger and fullness, all those other kinds of things, okay? And then you're going to find that a lot of these other tools of consciousness actually help you slow down. And so sometimes you're like, dude, I'm sitting here for like 20 minutes eating this meal, or 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, and I don't know how to slow down. Like, how do I actually fill up the time that I need to fill up, right? Because over here, unlike the observation, with the observation, that was a count up timer, right? And then on here, you have almost like a count down timer, or it could also be an up timer where you're just kind of keeping track of how long you ate as well, right? But you need to fill up that time. And how you fill up that time is, hey, chewing, putting your fork down, breathing, that kind of stuff, right? And then other points and changes to consider during this experimentation time. Maybe start to arrange your home and work schedule as best as you can to provide yourself with more time to slow down while eating. Okay, that's going to be an important change for you to consider during the experimentation phase. And then also look into enrolling your family and coworkers and boss and other people into creating more time and relaxation with these meals as well. Okay, so don't do this alone. Obviously, we want to support you as much as possible in the student community and also inside of the academy. However, we're not there eating your meals with you. And so really start to enlist and enroll, hey, other family members, hey, let me talk to you about the 7 tools of consciousness that I learned about and why it's so important, right? Start talking to other people about this. Start getting them involved with these activities. It's going to be so much less of a lonely road for you, okay? So that's the 3-day experiment section. And then the worksheet side of this is going to look like this. And so the same thing here, you're going to mark what time you started. Going to be a very important data point. What time you ended. Okay, so meal number 1, let's say 11:30. This was 11:45. It took me 15 minutes to eat. Which of the conscious eating tools did I practice? So I did, the 20-minute meal. I did chewing. I did, breathing, whatever it might be. And then observations. Same thing. You're going to be doing this for 3 days, and that's going to help you solidify a little bit more and kickstart that process of you getting used to some of these changes with your eating. And just remember, this is not just a 6-day thing. This is going to be a lifelong thing, but it's just a matter of kickstarting the process over the course of 3 days and 3 days. Okay, so that is a 6-day conscious eating challenge. Let us know if you have any questions about doing this properly. It's an amazing experience for you, as well as going to be an amazing experience for your students in the future as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from the quick mini training about the 6-day conscious eating challenge. Again, that's going to really help you solidify and put into habit and practice all of the tools that we talked about. And remember, this is not just a 6-day thing. You're going to be able to apply this for the rest of your life every single time you eat 3, 4, 5 times a day. And so you have a lot of practice with this. Don't just do this for 6 days and stop. The 6 days is just to kickstart the entire process, but this is something that you're going to come back and revisit for the rest of your life and encourage other people to do so as well, okay? Another valuable tool in the toolbox. Do you now see how valuable all of this is? There are literally entire 6- and 7-figure companies that their entire niche, they make 6 and 7 figures online, and their entire niche is mindful eating. This single training that you went through right now is the only thing that they talk about in their entire program. And you literally got it in just one training, okay? And so can you imagine how valuable you are going to be able to provide others transformation by the end of your certification? It's going to be amazing, okay? And so this is the void that you fill as an RWP, because for the first time in human history, we are dealing with problems that humans have never experienced before. And so where school and society is failing, RWPs are going to come in and be able to help society navigate these new times. Now, you might say, but Coach Yassine, all of this was so simple, like stupid simple. Why would anybody need me as a remote wellness practitioner? Now, I'm going to remind you, don't be one of those people that confuses the two topics that we talked about. Simple versus complex, easy versus hard. Most of life is simple, but not necessarily easy. Yes, all of these tools are simple, but they are not easy to implement consistently, which is why people need coaching to actually do these things consistently. And that is where you come in as a remote wellness practitioner. Not only do you need to educate them, because most people don't even know a lot of these things exist, but once you've educated them, you're going to help them actually do what it is they know that they should be doing now. Again, don't get overwhelmed. Don't make a monster that doesn't exist. You're going to learn more about this later. This is just reference to plant seeds in your mind, okay? And so this is the value that you provide as a remote wellness practitioner. You're filling that gap in the market. Here in phase number 1, as you get your certification, here in module 3, as you get all of that massive toolbox, this is the skill set that is going to put food on the table for you and your family for the rest of your life. This is the module that's going to allow you to not be a one-trick pony that literally only has one thing to provide for value, okay? You are literally going to be transforming other people's lives and your life in this entire process. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you may not be ready right now, but through the process, you will become ready. And so literally, I'm saying this stuff over and over and over and over again in every single training because it's going to be tattooed in your brain. You're going to be dreaming about my voice in your head talking to you about this. This is the process. This is the process, ladies and gentlemen. When it becomes so much in your head that by the time you get to module 5, it's going to be difficult for you not to provide value. It's going to be difficult for you not to provide transformation because it's going to be seeping out of your pores as a remote wellness practitioner. And so that is the process by which you become a person of value who can charge $1,200, $2,400, $3,600 for your transformation programs. And so, ladies and gentlemen, strap in because it's only going to keep on getting better from here. With that being said, let's go ahead and now talk about your student engagement post. Go ahead and let us know inside of the comment of the post. What was your biggest takeaway from this training of how to eat? What are your thoughts on conscious eating, right? What tool is going to be the most impactful for you? Which tool really stood out for you? And what parts of this training do you think would need help explaining to your students in the future, right? Don't make monsters where monsters don't exist, but just a little bit. Plant that seed for yourself. How would I explain this for my student? Try to get those gears turning and running. Remember, this is for you and your engagement in this. Don't do this lazily because this really helps you solidify what it is that you learned from this training. Other than the dang certification just a perk. Don't worry about that as much. Worry about your learning and your experience that you are getting from this program, okay? Last point, action steps. Let's talk about them. There's only 4. Action step number 1, obviously watch and study this training in full. Action step number 2, complete the engagement questions from this training, the ones we just talked about above. Action step number 3, you want to complete the 6-day conscious eating challenge, Okay. And then action step number 4, you want to comment on the 6-day conscious eating challenge student community post. Inside of that post, you want to let us know, what did you notice after you completed the 6-day conscious eating challenge? What did you learn from this activity? What did you observe? What did you change? What tools did you use? What tools didn't you use? How long were your meals on average? That's an awesome one I would love to do. I would love to know, I'm going to add that on here, is what was your average eating time before you started making changes? I want to add that on there because I would love to know. What did you notice? Were you scoffing down your food before you started making changes? How long was it on average taking you to eat your meal? Let us know. And also, what are your thoughts on this activity for your students? Okay. Again, just some sentence starters there for you so that way you can get your gears turning. With that being said, this has been a phenomenal training. I can't wait for you to do the action steps, and I will catch you on the next training.